The political and technological landscapes are currently abuzz with a confluence of events, each signaling significant shifts and ongoing debates across national and international stages. From contentious legislative battles over electoral integrity to sweeping policy directives impacting collegiate sports and even a high-profile international visit, a multifaceted narrative is unfolding, underscoring the deep and wide-ranging influence of key political figures and the institutions they command. A particularly charged development emerged from Sacramento this week, where California Governor Gavin Newsom hosted a delegation of Texas state leaders amidst escalating concerns over Republican efforts to redraw congressional lines in Texas. This move, allegedly initiated under pressure from former President Donald Trump, aims to consolidate Republican power and potentially allow Trump to operate without congressional oversight, specifically targeting the 2026 elections. Governor Newsom minced no words, stating, "Donald Trump called up Governor Abbott for one simple reason: to rig the 2026 elections. California's moral high ground means nothing if we're powerless because of it. This moment requires us to be prepared to fight fire with fire." The meeting, which occurred during a special session in Texas ostensibly convened for flood emergency response, instead focused on this controversial redistricting. Texas representatives, including Representative Rafael Anquia, expressed gratitude for Newsom's support, noting, "While Texas bows to Trump's election manipulation scheme instead of helping flood victims, we found real leadership in Governor Newsom." Senator Alex Padilla and Congresswoman Zoe Lofgren echoed these sentiments, accusing Trump of attempting to steal the 2026 election due to unpopular policies like healthcare cuts and billionaire tax breaks. Congressman Ted Lieu further warned that if Texas proceeds, California and other Democratic-led states would be ready to fight back in the courts, in the legislature, and at the ballot box, with several other state leaders from Arizona, Michigan, New York, Illinois, New Jersey, and Maryland voicing similar intentions to resist or even retaliate with their own mid-decade redistricting efforts. Polling data indicates significant public skepticism in Texas, with 63% of likely voters viewing the Trump-backed redistricting plan as unnecessary, suggesting a potential disconnect between the proposed political maneuver and public sentiment. Adding another layer to the week's events, former President Trump issued an executive order titled "Saving College Sports," a move poised to significantly reshape the burgeoning name, image, and likeness NIL landscape. Since a 2021 Supreme Court ruling allowed college athletes to profit from their NIL and a subsequent June settlement enabling direct payments from schools, the collegiate sports world has grappled with new complexities, including concerns over gender equality and the potential for collective bargaining. Trump's order. While not immediately legally binding, advocates for policies widely seen as favorable to the NCAA rather than athletes. Key provisions include prohibiting direct pay-for-play payments from third parties, insisting athletes only earn fair market value for legitimate services like brand endorsements, which some advocates argue would cap earnings. It also calls for protecting scholarships for non-revenue and women's sports and seeks a clarification from the National Labor Relations Board to classify athletes as non-employees, thereby removing their opportunity for collective bargaining. Furthermore, the order aims to shield the NCAA from future athlete lawsuits, a long-sought protection for the governing body. While this executive order carries no immediate legal weight, it aligns closely with proposed bipartisan legislation like the House's SCORE Act and similar efforts in the Senate, indicating a concerted push to bring more regulatory guardrails to the evolving college sports economy. Simultaneously, Trump embarked on a private 4-day visit to Scotland, arriving at Prestwick Airport and staying at his luxury golf resort Trump Turnberry. Accompanied by his son Eric, he was seen golfing amidst tight security, which included road closures, checkpoints, fences, and aerial surveillance by drones and helicopters. The visit, which will include meetings with UK Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer and Scotland's First Minister John Swinney, and the opening of a new golf course in Aberdeenshire, has drawn hundreds of demonstrators in Aberdeen and Edinburgh protesting his presence. Police representatives have also raised concerns about the substantial security costs and staffing impact. During his remarks at Prestwick, Trump commented on European migration, urging countries to get your act together, and reiterated his opposition to wind farms. a stance rooted in a past legal battle over a wind power development near his Aberdeenshire estate. The visit marks a rare occurrence for a sitting U.S. president in Scotland, highlighting the continued global attention on Trump's activities and policies even as he navigates domestic political and legal challenges. In a less detailed but potentially significant development, two senior officials from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration (NOAA) were placed on leave. Both officials had reportedly led the Sharpagate inquiry, an event that previously drew scrutiny and controversy. While specifics remain scarce, this internal administrative action could signal ongoing internal investigations or shifts within the federal scientific agency, potentially linked to past events that garnered public attention. These diverse events, from the contentious political maneuvering over redistricting and the future of democratic processes to the regulatory overhaul of collegiate athletics and a high-profile international visit, paint a picture of a dynamic and often turbulent political landscape. The actions and directives of influential figures continue to ripple across various sectors, provoking strong reactions, legal challenges, and policy debates. As the 2026 election cycle draws closer and legislative efforts around college sports advance, the coming months are likely to see intensified battles in courts, legislatures, and at the ballot box, underscoring the ongoing struggle for power and the shaping of future norms in American governance and society. In an era where digital platforms increasingly intersect with high-stakes economic policy and political theater, recent developments paint a vivid picture of the complex landscape surrounding former President Donald Trump. From the evolving trajectory of his social media venture Truth Social to an extraordinary public confrontation with the Federal Reserve Chair, these events underscore the unique blend of technology, finance, and personal influence that defines contemporary power dynamics. Truth Social, launched in 2022 as Donald Trump's answer to mainstream social media, continues to carve out a distinct, albeit niche, presence in the digital sphere. Fresh statistics from Domestically published July 25, 2025 reveal the platform has accumulated 4.36 million downloads and boasts over 2 million active users. Despite these figures, the platform remains dwarfed by industry titans like Facebook with its 3.05 billion users, and Twitter, now X, which commands 528.3 million monthly active users. Truth Social currently accounts for a mere 3% of social media users, indicating a significant uphill battle for broader adoption. Financially, the picture is equally challenging. The company reported a net loss of $49 million in the first 9 months of 2023, a stark contrast to its $1.42 billion valuation. This discrepancy highlights the speculative nature of its market value, driven perhaps more by political affiliation than traditional profitability metrics. A closer look at its user base reveals a strong domestic bias, with 84.16% of users hailing from the U.S. and a clear demographic tilt. The majority are men and Republican Party supporters. Indeed, 61% of Republicans indicate they will use the platform often or sometimes, a loyalty likely bolstered by Trump himself, who has amassed 6.59 million followers on Truth Social, over 2.5 times the platform's total active user base, though still significantly less than his following on legacy platforms like Twitter, 87.73 million. Curiously, despite its founder's political prominence, only 25% of Trump-endorsed candidates actively use Truth Social, and a mere 2% of U.S. adults rely on it for news, suggesting its reach as a primary news source is limited even among its target audience. Nevertheless, the platform has tangibly boosted Trump's net worth by up to $430 million, a testament to the financial leverage of digital media in the political arena. Meanwhile, the intersection of politics and finance manifested dramatically in a surreal scene on July 24, 2025, as President Trump engaged in a public fact-check with Federal Reserve Chair Jerome H. Powell during a tour of the central bank's headquarters. The visit, part of the administration's intensifying campaign against Powell's handling of the economy, saw Trump challenge the cost of the Fed's ongoing renovations. Standing side by side in hard hats, Trump asserted the project's cost had ballooned to $3.1 billion, only for Powell to promptly correct him, explaining the figure included a separate building renovated 5 years prior. This extraordinary exchange underscored the deep-seated tension between the two, fueled by Trump's relentless demands for the Fed to lower interest rates. For months, Trump has publicly lambasted Powell with insults ranging from moron to numbskull, viewing the Fed's unwillingness to cut rates as an impediment to economic growth and a political maneuver. The administration's focus on the renovation costs, which have indeed run approximately $700 million over budget on a $2.5 billion project due to factors like tariffs, rising material costs, and unforeseen issues like asbestos, appears to be a calculated effort to discredit Powell. This pressure campaign has been widely interpreted as an attempt to erode the Fed's crucial independence from political influence, potentially even laying groundwork for Powell's removal for cause, despite legal precedents that protect Fed chairs from being fired over policy disagreements. The unusual visit also served as a potential distraction for the president amid ongoing scrutiny related to the Jeffrey Epstein case. Despite the highly charged atmosphere, financial markets largely shrugged off the confrontation, focusing instead on technology earnings and trade deal progress, suggesting investors have grown accustomed to such political pressures on the central bank. These concurrent narratives highlight the multifaceted nature of Donald Trump's influence and the evolving challenges facing both digital platforms and independent institutions. Truth Social's struggle for widespread adoption, despite its political backing juxtaposed with its significant valuation and personal financial benefit to Trump, exemplifies the blurred lines between political branding and business viability in the digital age. Simultaneously, the public clash with the Federal Reserve underscores the persistent tension between presidential power and the institutional independence vital for economic stability. As Truth Social navigates its path toward profitability and wider reach, and as the Federal Reserve continues to assert its autonomy in a politically charged environment, the interplay between technology policy and personality will undoubtedly shape the future of these domains, with profound implications for American society and beyond. As President Donald Trump embarked on a 5-day visit to Scotland this week, ostensibly for high-level trade discussions, his trip quickly highlighted an ongoing and significant blurring of lines between presidential duties and private business interests. The journey, which included the inauguration of a new golf course bearing his name, has drawn considerable scrutiny amidst persistent domestic controversies in Washington. Landing in Scotland on Friday, July 25, 2025, President Trump was set to inaugurate a new golf course in Aberdeenshire, with his son Eric Trump reportedly cutting the ribbon for the new venture. This latest addition joins his existing Trump International Scotland course in the Aberdeen area and the Trump course near Turnberry on the southwest coast. While in Scotland, the president is scheduled to engage in trade talks with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and delivered characteristically blunt messages to Europe upon arrival, urging them to stop the windmills and control immigration, which he claimed was killing the continent. However, the primary narrative surrounding this overseas trip has quickly shifted from diplomacy to the intersection of power and profit. Critics point to the use of a presidential entourage, complete with advisors, White House staff, Secret Service, and media, to promote a family business enterprise as a stark example of potential conflicts of interest. The White House, through spokesperson Taylor Rogers, has largely dismissed these concerns, asserting that Trump's prior business success was a key factor in his electoral appeal and describing the Scotland swing as a working trip. Rogers further stated that Trump has built the best and most beautiful world-class golf courses anywhere in the world, which is why they continue to be used for prestigious tournaments and by the most elite players in the sport. Ethics watchdogs, however, paint a different picture. Jordan Libowitz, vice president for Citizens for Responsibility and Ethics in Washington Crew, articulated the prevailing concern, stating, "We're at a point where the Trump administration is so intertwined with the Trump business that he doesn't seem to see much of a difference. It's as if the White House were almost an arm of the Trump organization." This sentiment is exacerbated by a significant shift in ethics frameworks. While the Trump organization adhered to an ethics pact barring deals with foreign companies during his first term, the framework for his second term now permits such agreements. Consequently, the company has reportedly inked numerous lucrative foreign agreements involving golf courses, including planned luxury developments in Qatar and Vietnam, even as the administration navigates tariff rates with these in other nations. Adding to the complexity, the trip also serves as a backdrop to mounting pressure on the Trump administration regarding the release of more details on the Epstein controversy, as reported by NPR. This domestic political pressure, amplified by the perception that the president's trip may be a departure from Washington's political heat, further highlights the unusual nature of the visit. The history of Trump's existing Aberdeenshire course itself is fraught with controversy, having struggled to turn a profit and being cited by Scottish conservation authorities for partially destroying nearby sand dunes. The company also faced legal setbacks ordered to cover the Scottish government's legal costs after an unsuccessful lawsuit against a nearby wind farm, which it argued hurt golfers' views. Furthermore, the development was implicated in a massive civil case that accused Trump of inflating his wealth to secure loans and make business deals. Last year, Judge Arthur Engoron found Trump liable, ordering his company to pay $355 million in fines, a sum that has since grown to over $510 million with interest as appeals continue. The initial plans for the Aberdeen course, including a luxury hotel and housing, were allegedly exaggerated for loan purposes, without the promised construction materializing. While presidential golf is not unprecedented, Dwight D. Eisenhower was the first sitting U.S. president to golf in Scotland in 1959, and figures like William Howard Taft and Woodrow Wilson were avid players. The commercial aspect of President Trump's current trip sets it apart. Unlike previous presidents who primarily engaged in golf for leisure or exercise, this visit actively promotes a new, actively selling golf course, blurring the lines between private enterprise and public office. Even President Obama, who once described his handicap as an honest 13, had a golf simulator installed in the White House, which Trump upgraded during his first term, reflecting the sport's enduring presence in the Oval Office. Yet the current administration's approach, where the presidential platform is leveraged to showcase and profit from family assets, marks a distinct evolution in the intersection of American politics and personal finance. This highly visible intertwining of presidential duties with private business interests raises profound questions about transparency, ethics, and the potential for undue influence. As the Trump administration continues to navigate these unprecedented waters, the Scotland trip serves as a potent symbol of a presidency that appears increasingly comfortable with dissolving the traditional boundaries between public service and personal gain, a dynamic that will undoubtedly continue to shape political discourse and public expectations for years to come. The economic landscape in the United States is currently marked by a palpable shift in public sentiment, particularly among key demographic groups challenging the prevailing narratives surrounding the nation's financial health and the policies of the current administration. Recent polling data reveals a significant erosion of support for President Donald Trump, especially concerning his handling of the economy. A development that presents both a troubling sign for Republicans and a distinct opportunity for the Democratic Party. According to a CBS News/YouGov poll, President Trump's approval rating among men has plummeted to 47%, with 53% expressing disapproval of his performance. This marks a stark contrast to the 2024 November election, where Trump secured 55% of the male vote. The primary driver of this dissatisfaction, the poll indicates, is the economy. A substantial 49% of men believe the economy is worsening, while 59% disapprove of the president's approach to inflation. Further, 60% are concerned about his focus on tariffs, and a significant 65% feel he isn't doing enough to reduce the cost of goods and services. This sentiment is echoed strongly among Generation Z, with approval ratings for Trump among 18 to 29-year-olds dropping to a mere 28%. A staggering 71% of this demographic disapproves of his economic management. And 73% are critical of his handling of inflation, despite 56% of young men having voted for Trump in the last election. This widespread economic discontent, characterized by a recently reported decline in the nation's gross domestic product for the first time in 3 years and persistently high prices even as inflation cools, offers Democrats a clear pathway to refine their economic messaging ahead of the 2026 midterms. Beyond the economy, dissatisfaction also extends to other critical areas. The CBS News/YouGov poll shows 53% of men are unhappy with the Trump administration's handling of the Israel-Hamas conflict and 51% disapprove of his interactions with Iran. Immigration policies also draw criticism, with 50% of men disapproving and 47% noting that the administration is deporting more immigrants than anticipated. These broader concerns reinforce a narrative of growing public unease across multiple policy fronts, suggesting a potential opening for the opposition to leverage these anxieties. Amidst this shifting public opinion, a high-stakes drama continues to unfold between the White House and the Federal Reserve, underscoring the deep divisions over economic policy. President Trump recently embarked on an unscheduled tour of the Federal Reserve's headquarters, ostensibly to investigate the spiraling costs of its ongoing renovation project. This visit, however, quickly devolved into a public confrontation between the president and Fed Chair Powell, who has been a frequent target of Trump's ire over interest rates. During the tour, Trump cited a new higher figure for the renovation cost, claiming it had ballooned to $3.1 billion from an earlier $2.7 billion. In a rare display of public defiance from a top official, Powell immediately fact-checked the president, explaining that the additional cost pertained to a separate building, the Martin Building, which had been renovated 5 years prior. The Fed's $2.5 billion renovation project, which commenced in 2022 and is currently $700 million over budget, is slated for completion in 2027. Fed staff have attributed the cost overruns to rising tariffs, material costs, and labor expenses, as well as unforeseen issues like asbestos and soil contamination. They also emphasize necessary upgrades for security and architectural preservation. Despite these explanations, the White House has relentlessly attacked the project, with officials like Treasury Secretary Scott Bessent calling for an internal review and criticizing the Fed as an unaccountable agency. This fixation on renovation costs is widely perceived as part of a broader pressure campaign by President Trump to compel the Fed to lower interest rates, which he believes would significantly boost the economy and reduce the nation's debt servicing costs. The president has repeatedly demanded interest rates be 3 percentage points lower than their current 4.25% to 4.5% range, despite the Fed holding them steady since January due to economic uncertainties. Trump's attacks on Powell have been frequent and personal, with over 70 instances of criticism, including calling him a moron and a disaster. While Trump has recently indicated he is not prepared to fire Powell, legal experts remain wary, noting that a Fed chair can only be removed for cause such as gross misconduct, not policy disagreements. The administration's focus on the renovation costs, therefore, could be seen as an attempt to establish such cause, however flimsy, should the president decide to act. In a contrasting viewpoint, not all business leaders share the widespread economic pessimism. David Parker, CEO of Chattanooga-based Covenant Logistics, a trucking company, expressed optimism about the economy under President Trump, noting that his company recently set a quarterly revenue record. This perspective, while isolated, highlights the varied experiences within the business community and the complexity of the economic narrative. Meanwhile, other political pressures, such as a brewing redistricting showdown in gerrymandered states like Texas, continue to draw the president's attention, further illustrating the multifaceted challenges facing his administration. As the 2026 midterm elections loom, the shifting tides of public opinion, particularly among men and Gen Z, present a critical juncture for both major parties. For Democrats, the opportunity is clear: capitalize on the widespread economic dissatisfaction by crafting a compelling populist message centered on tangible solutions for inflation and cost of living, rather than relying solely on abstract political discourse. For Republicans, the challenge lies in addressing the tangible economic anxieties of their base and defending the president's policies against a backdrop of declining approval. The ongoing tension between the White House and the Federal Reserve, a critical institution for economic stability, will continue to be a focal point, testing the boundaries of its independence and potentially influencing market confidence, which, despite occasional jitters, has largely shrugged off the political drama thus far. The coming months will undoubtedly reveal whether these demographic shifts and institutional conflicts translate into significant political realignments and a redefinition of America's economic future. In a striking demonstration of the current administration's evolving approach to national security technology and public discourse, recent directives from the Pentagon and a newly unveiled AI action plan signal a profound shift towards a more politically aligned and infrastructure-centric future. These developments, emerging just days apart, paint a picture of an executive branch asserting greater control over both the narrative and the foundational elements of American power, sparking both support and significant controversy. The most immediate ripple effect comes from the Pentagon, which has announced a sweeping review of where its top military officials can publicly speak. This move, according to military.com, is part of a growing effort to restrict appearances to only those venues that align with the views of the Trump administration. The catalyst for this policy shift appears to be the Pentagon's decision to pull a host of senior military figures from the prestigious Aspen Security Forum just over a week prior, with officials claiming the event promoted the evil of globalism and hatred of President Donald Trump. Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth's office has yet to clarify the full scope of this review, leaving major annual military conferences like the Navy's Sea Airspace, the Marine Corps' Modern Day Marine, and the Army's Association of the United States Army (AUSA) in a state of uncertainty regarding future official attendance. Top Pentagon spokesman Sean Parnell stated that the Department of Defense's Office of Public Affairs would conduct a thorough vetting of every event where defense officials are invited to participate to ensure the department does not lend its credibility to organizations that run counter to the values of this administration. Pentagon Press Secretary Kingsley Wilson was even more direct on social media, declaring that going forward no DoD official will attend events by America-last organizations that promote globalism and hate Trump. This rhetoric has not been without its critics, with the Washington Examiner, a conservative outlet, labeling the new policy a war on thought. Joel Valdez, Wilson's deputy, countered on social media, dismissing think tank appearances as having no value and accusing them of being populated by America-last globalists foaming at the mouth. The term globalist, increasingly used by officials like Wilson and Valdez, has also drawn concern from the Anti-Defamation League (ADL), which has identified it as a frequent anti-Semitic dog whistle used to imply disloyalty. These internal policy shifts come even as Defense Secretary Hegseth himself recently took the unusual step of appearing at a political Turning Point USA rally, an influential right-wing organization, where he claimed the DoD don't do politics, while simultaneously criticizing NATO as freeloading off of America. Simultaneously, the administration has unveiled a comprehensive AI action plan subtitled "Winning the Race" that underscores a national security imperative to achieve unquestioned and unchallenged global technological dominance in artificial intelligence. This 28-page document, as reported by R&D World, frames the AI race as comparable to the historic space race, with China identified as the primary competitor. The plan marks a significant pivot from prior deregulation efforts, such as the rescinding of Biden-era regulations early in the second administration, towards an active federal commitment to building the physical and organizational infrastructure necessary for AI supremacy. The AI Action Plan outlines ambitious construction goals, streamlining permits for data centers and semiconductor fabs, making federal lands available for development, creating high-security data centers for military use, and establishing AI centers of excellence nationwide. It specifically calls for a massive upgrade to the electric grid, which it notes has stagnated since the 1970s, through new nuclear fission, fusion, and geothermal capacity. NVIDIA CEO Jensen Huang has publicly supported President Trump, pointing to his support for energy as a critical prerequisite for scaling the data centers required for future AI development. The plan's mantra, "Build Baby Build," encapsulates its focus on tangible infrastructure over abstract research. While the plan envisions a new golden age of human flourishing, economic competitiveness, and national security, it has also met with reservations. Over 80 labor, environmental, and civil rights groups have signed a People's AI Action Plan characterizing the administration's policy as a massive handout to the tech industry. Furthermore, 40 researchers from leading AI labs like OpenAI and Google DeepMind have voiced concerns that the rapid advancement of AI models could lead to a loss of interpretability, making it harder to understand how these systems think. The administration's plan, however, largely dismisses such concerns, reiterating its commitment to reject radical climate dogma and bureaucratic red tape in its push for infrastructure. The core logic of the AI Action Plan is clear. Before America can lead in AI-driven scientific discovery, it must first build the fundamental plumbing power in data pipelines. It treats data not as a byproduct of research but as a national strategic asset, directing agencies to unlock and secure vast troves of federal data and proposing initiatives like a whole genome sequencing program for life on federal lands to train future AI models. This comprehensive approach to AI, coupled with the Pentagon's new speech policies, illustrates a unified strategy from the administration to reshape the landscape of defense technology in public discourse, consolidating influence and directing resources towards a vision of American dominance. These parallel developments suggest a future where the lines between political alignment and professional engagement in defense and technology may become increasingly blurred. The implications for scientific collaboration, military-civilian relations, and the broader tech industry are substantial, pointing towards a more centralized and ideologically driven national strategy that will undoubtedly continue to generate debate and redefine America's global standing in the years to come. As President Trump departed Washington, D.C. for a 5-day visit to Scotland, the familiar swirl of political controversy and strategic maneuvering followed in his wake, highlighting the complex interplay of domestic challenges and a distinctive foreign policy agenda shaping his second term. Leaving behind persistent questions regarding the handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files and a White House under intense scrutiny. The trip to the UK was framed as a blend of personal business and high-stakes diplomacy, yet it underscored the defining characteristics of an administration determined to reshape global economic and political landscapes. The Scottish sojourn primarily centered on the opening of a new 18-hole course at Trump International Golf Links, and a visit to Trump Turnberry quickly revealed the mixed reception awaiting the American president. While supporters gathered at Glasgow Prestwick Airport, significant opposition was already mobilizing. A group named Stop Trump Scotland declared a festival of resistance, with a February Ipsos survey indicating a 71% unfavorable opinion of Mr. Trump among Scots, significantly higher than the 57% across the broader British public. Despite this, Scottish First Minister John Swinney emphasized the centuries-old friendship between Scotland and the United States, acknowledging the deep economic, cultural, and ancestral ties, even as he signaled intentions to raise humanitarian issues, including the unimaginable suffering we are witnessing in Gaza. Beyond the golf courses and protests, the diplomatic agenda in Scotland pointed directly to the administration's core economic strategy. Meetings were slated with British Prime Minister Keir Starmer and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, with trade expected to be a central theme. Charles Kupchan, a senior fellow at the Council on Foreign Relations, underscored this, predicting that if there's a deliverable, it's got to be a trade deliverable, noting the need to add meat on those bones to the quite bare bones trade deal struck with the UK in June. This focus on trade in Scotland serves as a direct extension of the Trump administration's broader American Industry First initiative, particularly its distinctive SUV diplomacy. This strategy, which has seen the administration leverage tariffs to open markets for U.S.-made sport utility vehicles, has emerged as a potent symbol of American industrial power and a key tool in its economic statecraft. In July 2025, a series of bilateral tariff agreements exemplified this approach, reduced tariffs on Japanese cars in exchange for Japan opening its doors to U.S. SUVs and committing to over $550 billion in U.S. industrial investment, a 20% tariff on U.S. goods for Vietnam in return for Hanoi expanding imports of agricultural products and SUVs,
and a 19% reciprocal tariff with Indonesia contingent on increased Boeing aircraft and U.S. SUV purchases.
This is no mere coincidence. As Pham Quang Hien noted, in modern diplomacy, SUVs not only sell well but fit his personal brand, big, loud, tough, conveying a message of a strong, self-reliant America. SUVs with their massive size and powerful engines have long symbolized the American auto industry, appealing to the emerging middle class in Asia as a mark of success, unlike Europe's preference for smaller, economical cars. The Trump administration has strategically placed them at the center of trade negotiations, from the restructuring of NAFTA into USMCA to trade tensions with the EU and China, turning them into negotiation leverage. The administration's tax plan in June 2025 proposed additional tariffs of 10 to 20% on Chinese goods, while reducing import tariffs from friendly countries willing to open their auto markets, particularly for SUVs with over 60% domestic production autonomy and export potential to emerging markets. This friendshoring approach aims to reduce dependence on China in the auto supply chain and strengthen influence with strategic allies. However, this strategy also pressures developing nations to adapt to a high fuel consumption model, potentially going against green transition trends, making SUV diplomacy not just a commercial choice but a political and developmental one. The impact of this aggressive trade posture is keenly felt by allies like Canada, whose Prime Minister Mark Carney has found himself in an elbows-down posture despite promising elbows up in negotiations with President Trump. As detailed by Francis Crescia of the Independent Institute, Carney quickly conceded to Trump's demand to remove Canada's digital services tax on large tech companies to restart trade talks, leading former Foreign Affairs Minister Lloyd Axworthy to question, when do we stop pretending it's all part of some clever negotiating strategy that justifies bootlicking in hopes of tariff concessions? Domestically, Carney's administration faces criticism for a lack of concrete results despite ambitious promises, including a smaller tax cut than advertised, elusive interprovincial free trade, and significant delays in infrastructure projects due to indigenous community concerns. The country's finances are under strain, with government bonds increasingly absorbed by hedge funds, signaling systemic risk. The Liberal government's proposed new accounting scheme, splitting the budget into operating and capital, raises concerns about transparency and the potential to mask growing debt. Oxford Economics has already cited U.S. trade policy uncertainty and new tariffs as contributing to a trade war-induced recession in Canada, leading firms to postpone investments and curb hiring. Meanwhile, the domestic controversies continue to dog the administration. The outrage over the handling of the Jeffrey Epstein files has dominated Washington, leading to the White House barring the Wall Street Journal from the traveling press pool after the publication of an article about a lewd birthday note allegedly sent by Mr. Trump to Epstein. While the president has vehemently denied the claims and sued the publication, the issue, along with questions about clemency for Ghislaine Maxwell, has overshadowed other significant policy shifts in immigration and social welfare and rising national debt. Kupchan aptly summarized the Scotland trip as low risk, noting that upon his return Mr. Trump would go right back into the frying pan. Adding to the complex tapestry of the Trump administration's second term, a concerning report has emerged indicating that diplomats were informed the Trump refugee program was intended for white people only. This revelation, if confirmed, would highlight a deeply controversial and discriminatory facet of the administration's broader immigration and humanitarian policies, further fueling domestic and international criticism and raising profound questions about the values underpinning U.S. foreign and domestic affairs. As President Trump navigates this confluence of international diplomacy, aggressive trade strategies, and persistent domestic challenges, his second term continues to redraw the lines of global engagement. The interplay between his personal brand, economic nationalism, and the resulting pressures on allies and international norms remains a defining characteristic. The coming months will undoubtedly reveal whether SUV diplomacy can sustain American industrial power without alienating key partners, and how the administration will address the swirling controversies at home, all while shaping a new, unpredictable chapter in global relations.